What was that noise? Should have heard this noise Flounders just made before. Flounders, you made some sort of noise. I don't know what that was.
Dave Jones, it's blue-white breakdown time. Speaking of, you just did mid-state, man, whether the people realize that or not. And that's a perfect lead into my first question for you. How many people that subscribe to our stuff and read your column, and I know that there's a lot of them, how many of them knew who the heck Slytherin was for your Big Ten Power Poll?
That's a really good question.
I just looked it up. I didn't know you were going to go Harry Potter on the Penn State football fan base, and I'm sure there were some people short circuiting. I thought it was a creative idea, but that's one for the books, my man.
If you don't know what Slytherin was, it was kind of the I wouldn't say evil, but they certainly were the antagonist. Everything is like fraternity houses in Harry Potter. And
right.
It's all a giant school, and yet there's the kind of good kids and the not so good kids who are conniving and scheming. And that reminded me of Michigan. And if you don't know anything about Harry Potter, you're just not going to get it. But my son did this, which I thought was fantastic. That is Jim Harbaugh as Professor Snape, Severus Snape, and JJ McCarthy.
For the listeners, there is a nice pic. You can see it on PennLive.
JJ McCarthy as Draco Malfoy. It was pretty much the Eddie Haskell for a generation who couldn't identify with anything else. Slytherin house.
I'm just imagining like the over 65 crowd looking forward to the Big Ten Power Poll, and they read the headline.
I don't know what he's doing.
And their brains fall. They slide out one of their ear holes. It's just like what? What is Slytherin?
Nick found an AI site that did that, which is pretty cool. I mean, he knew where it was, and it used to be you'd have to use some sort of computer program, some sort of graphic program to do something like that. Not anymore.
You're setting the bar high for the Power Poll moving forward. I'm just going to tell you that after that one.
There's not much more moving forward, in case you didn't know.
Hey, Dave, I wanted to say, I know we're going to get to our thoughts, but why don't we just? I put out on a subtext to our subtext base, hey, we're going to do this podcast. You guys, questions and comments, keys to the game. And I looked through them as we talk about Michigan invading Beaver Stadium at noon on Saturday. And there's a couple I thought that really we were going to talk about anyway. So before we get to what we think, how about I bring up some comments and I want to get your reaction to them. How about that?
Okay.
All right, this is from John Graham, one of our text subscribers. I'm trying to look for his comment. Here he goes. One key to the Michigan game is controlling JJ McCarthy, by far the best quarterback we have seen. Pass rush blitzes must get to JJ. The problem is if you blitz him, you got to get through that offensive line. Dave, what do you think about trying to pressure? It's one thing to pressure Talia Tagovailoa. It's another thing to try and pressure this guy. What do you think about trying to come after him?
I think they have to create 3rd and 6s.
Yeah.
And I don't know if they can, because Michigan's got a pretty offensive line. You know, when they pull and block or run counters and that stuff, they're really fun to watch. But they've been playing nobody. And I can't get a bearing. You can watch them, but they've played 9 games.
Yep.
And you don't know what this offensive line is going to do against a defense like Penn State's, because the closest they've played to Penn State is Rutgers. Rutgers is the best team they've played.
Yes.
And it's not even close. Everybody else in their Big Ten schedule, you could make a pretty good argument that it's all second division teams if you put Minnesota in the second division.
A lot of Big Green West fodder.
Certainly the other 4, Nebraska, Indiana, Michigan State, Purdue. It's the bottom of the barrel. So I can't possibly calibrate what's going to happen. You know what it reminds me of? I tried to text Frisco to ask him a question, but you might be able to come up with an example of this right away. Can you remember, like, 20 or 30 years ago when we were both doing high school football.
Loved
where
it.
we do playoff games.
Yeah.
And there would be this dynamo high school team that had just beaten everyone by 100.
Yeah.
And then they get into the playoffs, and they might have such arrogance and confidence that they just keep rolling, kind of like Berwick. Didn't that happen to Berwick a couple times, and they don't play anyone all year? And then you get into the playoffs, and you don't know what's going to happen. This is that to me. So sure, everyone wants to get pressure on the quarterback. That's all the time. But this is the best Michigan quarterback they've had, certainly in the Harbaugh era.
Right.
Because JJ is better than he was last year. He's better than Cade McNamara was 2 years ago. He's certainly better. I'm picking out the 3 best Michigan teams. He's certainly better, I think, than Wilton Spate on the 2016 team. Oh. And you remember that team was ranked 2nd in the nation.
Yes. Yep.
And I made that example, them as an example of the kind of game that Penn State has to play to win this, is that Iowa game that we watched. Where were we? It was a bar in Indiana someplace.
2016 was the year, and it was a night game. I do remember that.
We were at a noon game in what? Where were we? Indiana?
It was probably, well, we went to Indiana like 7 times that year, so it was probably one of the Indiana games.
I think we were at Indiana. We came back and we were all done. We get to the bar, and Michigan's, I was hanging in there against them, but they had Wilton Spate at quarterback, not JJ McCarthy. So to the point of our reader, he is much better than anything they've had at quarterback recently. And,
right.
Even the 97 team, Brian Greasy, I think JJ McCarthy's better than Brian Greasy. I think he's the best Michigan quarterback ever. I do. And
about John
Navarre? Not Tom Brady, but I'm talking about
John
a really good team.
What about Drew Henson? What about John Wangler?
Yeah, John Wangler, Chad Henne. I think he's better than all of those guys. He's better than Todd Collins. I mean, you can keep going and going and going because they've got a lot of guys who played in the NFL, a ton of guys who played in the NFL. But Tom Brady, maybe at the end of his career when he beat Alabama, and what was that, an Orange Bowl?
That was a fun game to watch.
Yeah.
Maybe
that, but all things considered, I think he's the most well-rounded, dangerous quarterback because he can throw on the run, he can throw quickly, he makes good decisions. Right now, he's playing as well as any Michigan quarterback I've seen, and I've been watching the Big Ten 55, 60 years.
Yeah. I'm with you, man. And James even said it. He said, they just haven't. They've been on time. They've never been behind the chains. They've never really been uncomfortable. And
that's the thing. They haven't been uncomfortable.
And I think they will be uncomfortable at some point. Yeah. I really do. And it's one thing to be uncomfortable in the first 10 minutes of the game. We're talking about the second half, into the third quarter with the crowd roaring. Can Penn State get the game like that? If they can, they have a shot. If it's going to be, if they're down 10 at halftime, it's just not going to happen.
And we forgot Elvis Gerback. Don't forget him.
They're short on vowels in that name. It's like Grbac. They were missing a vowel.
I just think that it would have been a lot better chance for Penn State if they'd had a nighttime whiteout. I really do.
Yeah.
I think the noon atmosphere is much better for Michigan. Mm-hmm. And maybe that's crazy, but that's what won that Ohio State game. It really did.
It did.
Once they got the blocked field goal in 2016, that crowd took them home. And I don't know if that can happen in this game.
Plus, that wasn't that great of an Ohio State team. That was the other thing. I didn't think. This is a good Michigan team.
They were pretty good, man. Except that they got housed by Clemson. And
I was going to say they were.
They did. You're right.
All right, Davo. This is from Louis Zielinski. We were going to get to this anyway as we preview the game. Is Penn State's offensive line going to be able to give Drew Aller time and also afford Katron Allen or Nicholas Singleton a crease to gain 4 or 5 yards on a consistent basis?
That's a very good question, and I think it's the question of the game.
Right.
That's one matchup that's not good for Penn State.
Correct.
The other one I think would be Penn State's wideouts against Michigan's secondary. That's a mismatch. And those two things are not good. They're both on offense. The only thing that Penn State can do is hit quick strikes over the middle to their tight ends on first down. I think that backs up Michigan's safeties. I mean, if Michigan's safeties get a chance to creep up and start cheating toward the line, it's over. And I don't think Penn State can do this 1960s NFL thing where you remember they always used to say they have to establish the running game. That isn't going to work against these guys, I don't think. They got guys running around. Mikey Sainer still. I mean, a former slot receiver.
Good player.
Has turned into a really good player.
Yeah.
But also Chris Jenkins and Jalen Harrell made some great plays in that Purdue game. But every time I see it play like, wow, then I remember they're playing Purdue.
Yeah.
You know, they're playing arguably
you got to catch up a little bit, don't you?
They're the worst team in the league right now. And they've played all these awful teams recently, Michigan State and Indiana before that. They just haven't been challenged. So I can't possibly gauge what's going to happen, but that's a very good question. Whether Penn State's offensive line, if they could get a draw in this game, Bob, right?
Yeah.
That would be huge. And I just don't know if they're capable. I mean, their interior offensive line, Michigan's tackles and guys up the middle, they run a lot of stunts and they bring their ends up the middle. If they don't handle that stuff, it could be real bad.
Yeah, I agree, Dave. That was a good question. Let's get to one more, and then we're going to get into some of the things we think. I have a bonus tech subscriber question for you, Dave, at the end of this podcast, because I think it's right up your alley. You're going to enjoy it. I'm going to save it, but I just want to remind everyone that's listening to this podcast, if you want to be one of our tech subscribers, the number to call to kind of join up, 717-912-9969. We enjoy interacting with you guys. I think, Dave, they've gotten really good they've gotten better at it as the year's gone on. I really enjoy some of their comments and some of their questions. They're not really out of left field. So it's enjoyable and we get a lot of the same people. And it's a pretty wide base. We get to hear from a lot of the same people. I think they've had some good comments. Keep it up, guys. One more for you, Dave. This is from Jeff High. How do you see the matchup between Michigan's passing game and PSU's secondary playing out? It's a good question because McCarthy's completing passes at like 75%. They have their one receiver's got 10 touchdown catches. But again, Dave, it's I don't know how scary this passing game is. It wasn't the passing game that got Penn State last year. And I just thought it was ordinary. But I think against some of these secondaries that are so worried about their running game, they're just leaving some wide open space in the back for them to complete these passes. Maybe PSU secondary is a better matchup because they're going to play aggressive man-to-man and put more guys in the box. What do you think?
If you remember what happened last year, they just ran at them.
Yes.
And took care of business at scrimmage, and that was kind of it.
That was it.
Why wouldn't they not do the same thing this time? I don't think it's necessarily germane unless they force some third and sixes. They're going to do what they did before and see if it works again. Not only you got Blake Corum, but you got Donovan Edwards finally playing pretty well. He was looking like Nick Singleton in the middle of the season. Lately, he's kind of come along and been more dynamic.
You might want to explain that since you brought it up, so let's get into it.
Okay, well, Donovan Edwards was not getting the ball a lot when they were running him. He's kind of like the change-up back to Blake Corum.
Correct.
And he just looked a little listless and disinterested and not as dynamic as he has been.
Right.
They started running him on slot routes and even wide routes, shift him out of the backfield and treating him almost as like a wide receiver, receiver. And the last game against Purdue, he ran straight down the sideline and beat. There was a I think it was that the kind of a star they have.
Yeah.
Purdue has a guy who's a little bit blocky who was scrambling
Yeah.
out to get him, and they snapped the ball and he wasn't quite out there.
And
I
that was
mean,
it.
he's a guy you have to cover. So he's a concern right now. It's kind of the way I think Singleton should be used with Penn State, but they really haven't done it to speak of. They haven't gotten on the ball when they have done it.
Yeah.
They got, and Roman Wilson just gets better and better and
Right.
better. The guy you were mentioning, he's probably as good a receiver as they've had in the Harbaugh era. And they had some other guys, but they didn't really use them effectively.
Right.
Under other, it's funny. Harbaugh has kind of hit his stride, and I know he has control of the offense. But when Josh Gaddis got fed up with him and they didn't really mesh, and he was supposed to come in, remember, and run some sort of spread option. And Harbaugh is Bo Schembechler. I keep telling that to people, but he kind of is. And it wasn't him. And they finally couldn't. They were at loggerheads all the time. And, Josh is now at Maryland, and that's probably where he belongs. He can do what he wants to do. And Michigan's got Sharon Moore as a former offensive line coach, essentially running play calling. But I'm sure Jim has a lot of say in it. But that's Michigan's personality. They found their personality. That's the stuff he wanted. He did at Stanford, minus the big fullback. But it's smash mouth football with some augmentation, and they are really impressive right now on offense. Granted, against crap competition. That's what we just don't know when presented with a really good defense. What's going to happen?
Yeah. Dave, there's two things I definitely want to get to you. And one, you brought up Singleton. James was asked on Tuesday about the 2RB committee, which essentially Penn State fans have figured it out. Like they are not going to deviate. They're probably going to start the game with Katron. He's going to get 2 series. And James said, then they're going to go to Singleton for 2 series and see how it shakes out. Well, I think it's already shook out, Dave. I mean, I don't see the upside of not leaning heavily on Katron Allen, especially against a defense like this. My opinion is that after 9 games, there's nothing else to see. I don't think anything's going to change. And
would you not play Nick as much, or would you do different things with him when he's?
You could try different things with him, but the thing about Edwards is I think he is an athlete who can be a player that can be like that in space. When I look at Nick, he's just he is a big guy. Like he's every bit of whatever they list him at, 220, 225. I don't know that he is, I don't know. I just don't know that he's got the agility to do some of those things. But if you can get him in space with the ball, it's going to be tough to catch him from behind. But he can't create his own. He cannot create his own space, Dave. And I just think it's unfortunate. But I don't know how they're going to. I just think it's almost a waste of 2 possessions to have him in the game, because if you need 2 yards, I think Donnie Collins said it on Saturday. If you need 2 yards, Nick will get you 2 yards. If you need 4 yards, Nick's going to get you 2 yards. So I think that's what it's come to, and I know he's a unique talent, but it has not happened this year. And I think Katron's got to be the guy. What do you think?
Yeah, I hate to pile on, but I'm going to. I mean, every time I see a pile move and a guy's gotten more yardage than I thought he got, it's Allen. And every time I think he's gotten less yardage,
he carried the whole Maryland team into the end zone on Saturday.
It's Singleton. I think Singleton's gotten 4 and he's gotten 3.
Yeah,
or 3 and gotten 2. And Allen's the opposite. He finishes runs. So I can't disagree with you. I'm just talking about.
Yeah.
I think he's a valuable piece. I just would never run him between the tackles anymore. Yeah. Why? Yeah. Run him on wheel routes, but do some gadget stuff with him.
Yeah.
But don't do this anymore because it's not working. It's certainly not going to work against these guys. These guys, they are very aggressive in the front. And if they sense any weakness, they go for the jugular, man. They start loading up and coming after you. A lot like Penn State's defense that way. Mm-hmm. Penn State has to be assertive and back off those safeties right away. I just think the only answer is quick pops down the seam over the hashes to the tight ends.
Yeah.
You've got to do something in the middle of the field, and they can't get anyone open down the middle of the field with their wideouts. I mean, you can try, but I don't think it's going to happen against the secondary. It's a problem. I mean, they can't make, on the one hand, they can't make mistakes that give Michigan 7 points. On the other, they have to do something to keep in the game, that give themselves a chance. They got to score 20, don't you think? They got to score 20 to have a chance.
I do.
So it's a very tough problem.
Yeah, you said it. I think really well there. I think some of the fans are probably, and I was impressed with how Drew played against Maryland. He was not rattled. I know it was Maryland, right? But he looked comfortable, and he put the ball almost, I would say 90% of the time, exactly where it needed to be. But one of the things I wanted to bring up with you is Michigan's defensive coaches are not idiots. I say that because I'm pretty sure Maryland's are. James Harbaugh, they stayed in coverage 0 the whole game, which means there was no one deep. There was not a soul deep when they wanted to throw the ball.
It was kind of an unfounded arrogance, wasn't it?
Drew took a look at that and said, "Look, I'm feeling it. Your cover guys aren't that great, and I'm just gonna keep chucking it deep." He was locked in, and they paid a price because he was locked in. I mean, a lot of those, he could have had over 300 yards. There were some drops in that game. There were some really tight coverage, but he threw the receivers open. I don't think Michigan is going to do that. They're going to mix their coverages. They're going to give Drew a lot to think about. I don't think he had a lot to think about the way that Maryland played defense. They were daring him to throw deep.
Not only that, when you bring your safety,
he said, "All right, here you go.
When you press and bring your safeties up like that, you should get some pass rush, shouldn't you?"
Yes.
And they didn't get a thing. I mean, he was in an easy chair all day. It was like the worst of both worlds for that defense. It's just not very good. I mean, they have been better under Brian Williams, that DC, this year early in the season. They were pretty damn good against Ohio State for about 2.5 quarters. Mm-hmm. But I think that they're a shot fighter at this point. And the Maryland defense we saw just wasn't very good at all. And the offense was worse. It's very hard to gauge what's going to happen in this game because the Big Ten is so bad. I mean, it's just god awful. I think Rutgers is the last good team in this league, and they're the fifth. I kid you not, they're the fifth best team in this league. They're the fifth best team in this league. They are the fifth best team in this league, and after that, you're just palms up. Wisconsin is no good. You know what Iowa is, and Iowa's the fourth best. There just is nothing there, and week in, week out, everyone's playing this slop. I mean, it's like American Athletic Conference stuff. Some of it's worse. I mean, you get bent down to the bottom, it's like the Sun Belt. And I don't know. I can't know what's going to happen until I see what kind of fizz Penn State's defense has against McCarthy. Because he hasn't seen anything like this.
Right.
And we'll see. He made mistakes at the end of the last season. He threw 2 pick sixes against Texas Christian that were the difference in that game. We will see. He looks terrific right now.
Okay, so why don't we do this? Before we get to our picks, this is not, I think you're gonna like this, Dave. One more subtext commenter, Peter Key, had this for you, and I think you're gonna enjoy it. I want to thank Dave for spreading the word about the Ferentz line, which the Iowa Northwestern game went under like a 10-year-old gymnast goes under a limbo bar.
Under.
As David Burge, whose X handle is Iowa Hawk Blog, and who specializes in identifying old cars and pictures people post to him, noted yesterday, the 5 lowest over-under games in the history of football betting have all included Iowa, all in the last 2 years, and all but one have hit the under.
That's like Tony Sinise stuff. He would have given me that. And Tony Sinise, I have to credit our buddy, our former Vegas odds maker, who's originally from Altoona, gave me this line a few days ago. And he said, I've come up with it. You've heard about the Mendoza line. Old heads baseball guys will remember the Mendoza line named after Mario. Tom Paciorek thought that up when they were both on the expansion Mariners, I think it was, in like 1980. And Mario Mendoza was the shortstop who couldn't hit over 200. He was seen as that was seen as the bottom of the barrel back then. Of course, now we got Schwarber hitting 197. But back then, it was considered just the bottom of the barrel of where you could survive on a major league roster. Hitting 200 was the Mendoza line. Well, the Ferentz line is 30. 30 on the over-under. And Tony told me, and he's an old Vegas odds maker who knows this stuff, that it used to be, he said, Dave, it used to be back 6-8 years ago, not long ago at all, that 35 was considered the absolute basement. And now Brian Ferentz has rewritten the records. He's rewritten the record book. And 30, and Tony submitted that we start calling this the Ferentz line, which would be 30 from now on. So that game against Northwestern was at the Ferentz line. Where did it settle? 30 and a half before the game? Was that right?
It was 0-0 at halftime, and I think Johnny McGonigal looked up the live over, and I think it was 14 and a half at halftime.
And it ended 14. So what did it end?
I mean, that's just
17.
That is ridiculous. And
did you see the black and white silent movie made out of it?
Yeah, you showed it too.
Somebody put the film in black and white with like grainy like lint and stuff on it, and put a ragtime soundtrack behind it.
This is the worst the Big Ten West has ever been, right? There can't have been a worse Big Ten West season.
It's going out on the bottom, man. It's going out as bad as it can get, and there won't be any more division.
Are you going to do Are you going to do a reverse power poll where you rank the teams from worst to best in inverse order or something like that?
Well, I kind of do that anyway because I start back to front.
I know.
Bottom to top. The first ones I mention are always the worst teams, and there's been a battle for the worst team. I mean, I've probably had 5 different.
Put your money on it right now. Is it Purdue?
Boy, I gotta look at the schedules. I'm gonna have to go look at the film, Bob. I can't.
This feels like I just gave you a 3-day project. I apologize. I did not mean to do that to you.
It's up for grabs. I think Illinois is going to make a move. They've been down there. I think Northwestern likes their coach. Nebraska's got such an awful schedule. They would have had a chance to win the division. If Northwestern can simply pull that game out and it was there for the taking, we would have had a 5-way tie for first place at 3-3 for the league and Northwestern could conceivably have won that division. That's how bad it is. Yeah, I'd go with Purdue. I'd go with Purdue at this point. Yeah.
Those ratings for the Big Ten title game this year are just going to be really, really, really good. Really good.
Nebraska's still not out of it, Bob.
I was disheartened. I knew they kind of were running on fumes, and they were doing it. They were kind of doing it with duct tape. But I thought they could beat Michigan State.
I always got to play Rutgers, Illinois. Hey, you laugh.
Load up on Rutgers.
Rutgers. It's in Iowa City. It's in Kinnick. But Rutgers is a pretty good team right now. I'm telling you, if they had like Mike Teal at quarterback, they could have won that Ohio State game. That was a ball game. Yeah. It was a 1-score game in the fourth quarter. They are much better at scrimmage. They are legitimately the 4th or 5th best team in the league right now, and the team they're battling with for that honor is Iowa. I mean, they're right there.
28.5 for the over/under or lower? Iowa.
What is it? Did you look?
No, this weekend.
Yeah.
I'll look right now. All right. You talk about Slytherin right now, and I'm going to look it up. Hold on.
You're not that quick.
Come on. I can get it into like 30 seconons, man.
I'm not a Harry Potter ophile. I'm not. I'm just.
What about the 68-year-old Penn State fans that read that headline? They're like, "Oh my God, Jones has lost it."
Doris, come in here. You understand this?
What did he do now?
Where's Katie? Can we get her on the phone?
This wrong?
I don't know.
I'm looking. Is it a night game? It's definitely this week, right?
Yeah.
All right. I'm looking.
They're at Iowa.
Is it a night game? Please tell me, dear
I don't
God.
know, man. I don't
know.
know.
Here it is. Yeah, I found it. The total's 29.
Wow. We're even lower. Yeah. That opens.
And Iowa is getting 1 point right now.
So that's 15-14.
Yes, that's right.
The odds makers seem to have learned they can't go low enough. How low can they go? And it keeps going under every time. That was way under. It didn't even struggle to get under.
Yeah. It's actually kind of tragic. Dave, speaking of low scoring games, this one, unless there's some mistakes and easy touchdowns, and last year's Penn State Michigan game felt like it would be pretty low scoring, and they just got gashed, and it was 41-17. What do you think? What's your call for this one?
You haven't even mentioned this scouting scandal. We haven't even mentioned.
What is there really to say at this point?
Do you think it's even going to have an effect? That's on the players, because I think not. If anything, they're more defiant. Michigan's more.
And it sounds like if anything's going to come down, it's going to be directed at Harbaugh and not the.
And a Michigan person I know said the only effect that'll have is if he gets suspended, they'll get the players. They'll get the plays in on time better.
Yeah, it's probably going to galvanize him, Dave. Honestly, he's pushing the right buttons, saying all the right things.
I think at some point it might wear on them, but we haven't reached that point, and so I'm gonna say
it's 4.5. The line is 4.5.
Michigan. I'm gonna say Michigan 24, Penn State 20. Damn it! I think it's gonna look a lot like the 21 game. What was that? 21-17.
21-17 with that late touchdown pass when those guys collided. Sean Clifford took a beating in that game. Those tackles got just overrun by.
Yeah, I think Howard's going to take some hits too. He's going to have to hang.
Yeah, he is, and there's only so many quick throws you can make. At some point, you got to stand in there and get the ball down the field to somebody. You have to. I think 24-20 is what I was going to say, but since you said it, I'm going to say 25. I'm going to say 25-20.
You can agree with me.
I never will agree with you, sir.
You can agree with me. It's okay to agree with me.
No. Yeah. Plus, I like 25. It's one of those numbers that it's not scoregami. Now I sound like you. No, you're right. I'm going to say 24-20. I'm going to stick with it.
And
that was the score. That was the score I wrote down, actually. So I was like, "Gah!"
Somebody wants his breakfast, so we better, he's just coming out.
Kaiser, you're looking good, my man. You're looking good, and. Dave, hey, I'll see you up there in a couple of days. Are you going to leave bright and early, or are you going to try and evade traffic and just kind of sneak through the back door?
No, for Michigan, you have to grin and bear it. You
got to run your route, buddy. You got to take it as it comes.
We're going to go early. We're going to go real early and get in there. It's going to be an interesting game, but I don't see when you start having to string together ifs. That's what I was looking at.
Yeah, that's right.
Saying if, and you've got 4 or 5 ifs, you're probably trying too hard to rationalize a Penn State win. That's the only thing.
The one thing I would say, and I do believe there's some truth to it, is you just don't know how Michigan's going to react if they're behind with 15 minutes to go. Even if
it is that high school team.
That is a legit concern because that crowd can really impact the game.
It is that high school team that's beaten everyone by 100.
Right.
Because they have not been challenged at all. And I don't mean even in a tight game. I just mean at scrimmage. The Rutgers is the only team that's even given them a game. And not much of a game. So that's all I can say about it. All right. See you up there, buddy.
All right, Dave. Have a good rest of the week. Bye, Kaiser. Have a good walk.